We got to get back to doing what's expected of us as free citizens in this democracy. That means being tolerant, being respectful, staying informed, and being engaged. I'm former Congressman Joe Walsh. Follow me here and join the millions of Americans who are renewing their social contract with each other. The social contract, it's on us. Hey, Monday, baby. We're 1 week out. Let me start the show doing something a little different than that. Ordinarily, I just jump right into whatever the hell I want to talk about. Here's what I'm going to do this Monday. And I thought, hello, TikTok. I'm back. I'm live on TikTok. Got to watch my language. Ordinarily, I just jump into my take and what I'm thinking. Boom, boom, boom. Here's what we're doing today. I'm going to give a little 3 to 4 minute rant on something. And then I am going to 1 week out. We are going to handicap this race. I'm going to bring on one expert I know, very good dear friend, Kurt Jetta, a part-time political analyst and data guru. I'm going to bring him on momentarily. And if we've got real Carl Allen back with us, our favorite handicapper, he'll join Kurt and we'll get to all of that in a moment. But let me start with a rant. And I love a good rant. I don't know that I have the energy right now to yell and scream. If I look tired, it's because I'm tired. If I look exhausted, it's because I'm exhausted. If I look haggard, it's because I'm haggard. I campaigned all day yesterday in the great state of Arizona for Kamala Harris. Events and rallies up and down the state, ending in just a great, beautiful, engaged rally with Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego, who's going to kick Kari Lake's ass. Susan Rice, former ambassador Susan Rice, just a great rally. But I got on the red eye back to DC late last night, and I'm off to, where am I off to? I'm off to Pennsylvania tomorrow. I'm off to North Carolina the following day. I'm off to Wisconsin the following day, and then back to Pennsylvania, I believe. So yeah, I'm tired, but so what? We got 1 week to go. And what I know is this. Hello, TikTok. I wanna bring up, in my mind, the most dangerous and scariest thing that was said at that Madison Square Garden Trump rally last night. If you haven't heard about it, if you didn't pay attention to what was said at that rally, you really ought to. It was 3 to 4 hours of hate, 3 to 4 hours of cruelty, 3 to 4 hours of divisiveness, 3 to 4 hours of bigotry and racism and fear. There was anti-Latino bigotry. There was anti-Black racism. Speakers called Kamala Harris the Antichrist. I could go on and on and on. All of the speakers, and they were all applauded by the crowd. It was a MAGA love fest. And it was a Trump love fest. And Donald Trump, as this campaign comes to an end, is digging deeper down inside of us to get at the ugliest pieces of us he can get at and poke them and pinch them and grab them and shake them. He's getting uglier by the day. Trump is getting darker by the day. That's what last night at Madison Square Garden was. It was the worst of us again. Just out, and I don't even want to get into it. I'd Google it. You read about what was said last night at the Trump rally. It was just out and out bigotry and hate and divisiveness and ugliness. What Trump is doing to try to win. He's not appealing to the good in you. He's not appealing to the hopeful in you. He's not appealing to the embracing, big-hearted you. He's appealing to the ugly you. And that's what we heard for 3 or so hours yesterday. And again, contrast that with what Kamala Harris is doing out there, appealing to your better angels. But I wanted to point out one thing that was said yesterday. By Tucker Carlson, one thing, amidst all the bigotry and all the hate and all the ugliness and all the divisiveness that was publicly uttered yesterday at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally, Tucker Carlson said the thing that we Americans need to pay attention to again. See, here's the deal. Donald Trump wants there to be unrest and violence again in America if he loses. Do you hear me? Don't be angry about all the bigotry and all the hate that he and his cheerleaders spew, but be aware of and be ready of this. They want violence again. Trump wants there to be unrest and violence in this country if he loses. He wants it. He wanted it in 2000. He wanted January 6th. He wanted our government, the election results overthrown. He wants violence again this year if he loses. And yeah, that alone, that on its face should be utterly disqualifying. That alone is why no American should ever vote for Donald Trump. How in God's name can anybody vote for a candidate who actually wants there to be violence in America? And Trump wants it. And Tucker Carlson, one of his biggest, easily one of his most cynical cheerleaders, said as much. Tucker Carlson said last night that there's no way Kamala Harris can win. There's no way she can win. There's no way 85 million people are going to vote for her. Tucker Carlson said, and this is really important because you need to know, you need to understand why Tucker Carlson said this. He said it's impossible for Kamala Harris to win. Keith, do we have that clip?
The rest of us, through mostly just sticking around in the face of their hate and abuse and persecution, he has given the rest of us the right to call BS on the charade. No. You are not better than us. No, you are not smarter than us. No, you do not deserve what you have. You probably stole it. No, you're not going to bully me into silence anymore. And I can promise you at this point, 9 days out, when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and pretty much every high school senior and college sorority girl in the country has come out finally say, yeah, I am for Donald Trump, actually. When the entire country has realized there is nothing embarrassing about this, what's embarrassing is to take a perfectly great country and destroy it, as they have. I'm not ashamed. You should be. At that moment, it's going to be pretty tough for them, 10 days from now, to look in the eye to America with a straight face. It's going to be pretty hard to look at us and say, you know what? Kamala Harris, she got 85 million votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, it was just a groundswell of popular support.
There's the money line. Tucker Carlson there said, it's impossible. There's no way Kamala Harris will get 85 million people to vote for her. There's no way. And yeah, he engaged in ugliness and cruelty and hate, right? The personal insults, but that doesn't matter. This matters. Tucker Carlson said to that audience, and Tucker Carlson last night said to every Trump supporter, Kamala Harris can't win. It will be impossible. It's impossible. Now, why would Tucker Carlson say that? And why would Trump continue to say that? Why would Trump and Tucker want you to believe it's impossible for her to win? Because if she does win, you won't believe it. And if you don't believe it, you will think it was stolen. And if you think it was stolen and you think it was rigged, you will do a January 6th. You will try to overthrow the election. You will engage in violence because the impossibility happened. The impossible happened. What couldn't have happened, happened, Tucker Carlson said, because it was stolen, it was rigged. Damn him. And damn Trump. You cannot get more un-American than this. That's Tucker Carlson inciting Trump's supporters to get violent if she wins. There's no way. There's no way 85 million people will vote for her. She's a joke. It's impossible for her to win. And then she wins? Well, the only explanation then, as far as Trump and Tucker are concerned, is once again, it was stolen. It was rigged. And that lie, that ugly, dangerous lie, again will lead to violence. And Tucker Carlson is smart enough to know it will lead to violence. Tucker Carlson is smart enough to know that what he said yesterday will cause violence if Kamala Harris wins. I don't want Trump to win. I don't. There's no way I'd stand in front of a crowd of people and say, there's no way Trump can win. It will be impossible for Donald Trump to win. There's no way I'd say that because that's not true. Trump could win. Kamala Harris could win. But if you want your audience and your supporters to not accept the results, you say stuff like that. That's Tucker Carlson doing what Trump has always done, sowing distrust in our elections by lying about them. And the goal of the lie, the goal of the stolen election, rigged election lie has always been violence. Trump and Tucker want there to be violence on our streets. If Kamala Harris wins, they would love another January 6th if Kamala Harris wins. That's way more dangerous to this country than all the anti-Latino bigotry they spewed yesterday and all the anti-Black racism they spewed. Be ready, America. What Tucker said last night is not the first. Trump and his cheerleaders are once again in the United States of America lying about our elections to sow distrust in our elections to create violence. Damn them. Damn them. No easy segue, but let's segue. I went long with that rant, but let's segue now. We're a week out from Election Day, and I want to bring in my good friend, Kurt Jetta, to join me to handicap where the hell this race is at right now. Kurt is a part-time political analyst. He's a full-time real estate developer. He's a data guru. I've worked with him on polling and campaigns for a while now. He's brilliant. He's contrarian. And I really want your take. Kurt, my friend, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Glad to be here.
So let's start with the big, broad, stupid question. I'll ask you, my sports fan as well. Handicap this thing now 1 week out. Handicap this race for me.
We have Carl here too. I'll be interested to see.
Carl Allen, are you there?
Come on, guys.
I'm So my approach is a bit different than Carl and others because I tend to rely less on the polling and more on external factors. So I'm putting the likelihood at 75% for Harris.
Okay, and we'll get into your thinking in a moment. 75% a week out for Kamala Harris. We're joined by our favorite handicapper pollster, Carl Allen. There he is, at Real Carl Allen. By the way, Kurt Jetta's follow on Twitter, and you should follow him, is at Kurt Jetta. You can see it spelled right there, all one word. Carl Allen, thank you, my friend. We haven't talked in about a week to 10 days. You heard Kurt. Give me your handicap of this race a week out. Go, my friend.
Yeah, I'm not quite as confident as Kurt on that end. I have Harris as a 65% favorite, which is basically where I've had her for the past month. If you follow other forecasts, 538 Nate Silver, you've probably noticed some kind of wild fluctuations in movement. There has been nothing in this race. There has been nothing in the data, early voting or poll data, to suggest anything other than a close race that slightly favors Kamala Harris and Democrats. That's where we're at right now.
Carl, thanks. Let me push you a bit on that, and then I want you and Kurt to respond to this. I appreciate you saying there's been no great grand swings, but again, I'm not the expert, but in everything I've read, there seems to be a consensus that Trump's had a slow, steady improvement. Both of you react to that.
Yeah, I'll go first if you don't mind. It's been very, very narrow and very expected. So what we were looking at a month ago was Kamala Harris close to 49 in the poll averages in all states, all swing states, I should say. And Trump was at 46, 47, 48. His movement upwards has been basically consolidating his base. There has been very little movement among those undecideds that we always talk about. And again, we're only talking 3 to 4% undecided, but there's been very little movement among them. So all good forecasts must account for A, if these people will vote, and B, ultimately who they'll vote for.
Hey, Kurt, answer that question as well. But again, if I just ask you directly, damn near every poll, the major polls that I've seen of late, has shown some kind of a steady growth for Trump. Yay or nay? And what is it?
It's been marginal. And yeah, it's explainable by, I think I've seen the undecided slip a little bit, and that would be explainable by, Carl's point that they're, bringing home the base. That's something very similar we saw in 2022. In a lot of the races I was tracking closely as well. And that definitely accounted for that, red wave surge we saw before the election.
I guess I just thought, you two, that Trump's, like this notion of Trump's base coming home wasn't really a factor, because I just figured that was there. So I figured some of this other stuff Trump was getting in the last few weeks was coming from undecideds or Haley Republicans or whatever.
Well, the Republicans always come home. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kurt, start.
Well, the Republicans always come home. And, even though there's a huge base, of course, for Trump, not all Republicans or, right-leaning independents feel good about it. And, you just tend to see that more and more of those people will come home. But, as far as all the efforts to try and get Republicans to go over, I mean, there's going to be 3 to 5 at the absolute high side. Same with, Democrats going over to Trump. The fight is all over the independents, and they tend to be more Harris.
So, Carl, respond to that.
You're exactly right. So this movement that we're talking about, because we're so obsessed with these very, very, very narrow data points, there has been, to your point, Joe, a slight movement towards Trump. But we're talking about I'm looking at my numbers right now. In the past month, Trump's position in the poll average has improved less than 1 point. But Kamala Harris's has only improved about 0.2. So, yes, Trump's position has improved relative to a month ago, But again, we're talking less than 1 point across all swing states. So there's not really been any substantial unexpected movement other than to say, yes, it is close. Yes, Trump and Harris will both probably get to 48% in all of the swing states. And who ultimately gets across that finish line is going to be decided by those independents. For the first time, 2016, we saw a lot of data to support the idea that most of the undecideds lean towards Trump. 2020, same data. Now, 2024, we're looking at a subset of independents, moderates, undecideds who would favor Kamala Harris. If Democrats can get those people to vote, then they should win in the most important states, especially the blue wall. But across all of the swing states, they have a very, very good chance if they can push those undecideds not their way. The undecideds lean towards Democrats right now. The challenge and the reason that I think this election is so close is whether or not they will ultimately vote.
Why, Kurt? To Carl's point, like, why is this election close? If Trump has, and correct me if you disagree, and Carl, you and I have talked about this, in 2016, 2020, Trump's always had this 47 to 48% ceiling. And so if he's still got something like that, then why the hell is this election close?
Well, I mean, the electorate is divided. I've looked at the 6 swing states.
Yeah.
Looked at president, governor, Senate for the last 3 cycles, 2018, 2020. Republicans won 6 of 34. They won 1 of 11 in Michigan. So it is, or I'm sorry, 1 of 15 in the blue wall states in overall. But they were almost all of them very close elections.
Okay.
2 or 3 points. But there is a clear, what's the default you'd say, Carl? Like any race starting out is what? 48, 46. Democrat,
Yep.
Republican, 49, 47. It's
Yep.
That's the default. And then trying to move it off of that default position is really where all these billions of dollars are being spent.
But Kurt, that's interesting. And maybe I got the numbers wrong. But if you grabbed 2018, 2020, 2022, and you looked at about 34 statewide races in the 6 battleground states, and
Yep.
Republicans only won a small minority of those
won
states.
6, and 4 of those were from very popular governors. Kemp, Ducey. There was one that was really only surprised that I saw in Nevada, the governor.
Carl, do you buy that? Do you buy that theory on Trump that he does have this ceiling, and the odds of him rising above that ceiling could happen, but not a great chance it'll happen?
That actually almost reads verbatim like an article I wrote for Mike Madrid, posted on his Substack about the MAGA ceiling and why this should be such a worrying sign for Republicans, because MAGA has a very, very large base, but that message doesn't play as strongly in these swing states because these states are not as red as the state I live in, for example, Ohio. So these messages that they're running, like that, I was listening to what you were saying about this campaign rally. That sounded like a convention to rile up the base. Who is he winning over with messages like this? Is he winning over?
I'll tell you, Carl. And I mentioned this to Kurt earlier. I felt like months ago, Trump and his team said, we are all in with scaring the shit out of people on immigration and crime because they believe that appeals to people beyond just his base. I've always felt that. They could be mistaken, but I think what you saw at Madison Square Garden last night was the culmination of their strategy. Like, they can scare people beyond just his base about migrants, immigration, and crime. Do you guys buy that?
I think it's a good theory of the case. But then you also have, the whole democracy and abortion issue that, that seems to pretty much neutralize anything about that. Can I just also lay to rest one of the biggest misconceptions out there? And I think a source of the huge angst is the 2016 defeat. You always hear, oh, Jill Stein lost the election. Gary Johnson lost that election. So if you look at Trump's numbers, 16 to 20, they only went up 0.4 points. Whereas Clinton to Biden went up, I think, 4 or 5. I mean, it was a very, very big shift. And that was entirely a function of the very high percentage of Gary Johnson vote. That third party situation doesn't really exist. There's going to be 1, maybe 2% that will go to a third party, but it's not going to be material enough like we saw in 2016 to really kind of be a worrisome event for Democrats. So that's, I think, also, that residual angst is what is weighing on the whole Democratic panic.
Carl, you buy that?
That is absolutely correct. So Democrats since 2008 have been considered heavy favorites in every election that they've entered in the presidential level. Obama 08, 12, Clinton 16, Biden 20. Of course, Democrats lost as favorites in 2016. So that leaves this feeling of what is a close race. That leaves this feeling among Democrats. They're not used to being underdogs. They're like the New England Patriots of the previous years when Tom Brady was the quarterback. They're not used to being underdogs. They don't know what that's like. I don't think Democrats are underdogs. I think Democrats are slight favorites, but only being slight favorites makes them feel as if they're underdogs. So that's exactly right, Kurt. On the note of the movement from 2016 to 2020 with Biden. On the note of the MAGA ceiling, I'll say this about some other forecasters, and most folks don't know who I am. That's okay. But I am extremely critical of other forecasters who basically put data into a model and it spits out this nice, pretty, clean looking bell curve. 538 has a 10% chance that Kamala Harris gets 55% of the vote in Pennsylvania. And they have a 10% chance that Donald Trump gets 55% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Combined, that's a 20% chance, a 1 in 5 chance that either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump gets 55%. That's winning Pennsylvania by 10. They have this as a 1 in 5 chance. That's not correct. They're putting all of this data into the model and saying, okay, this is what it says. That is not a good way to look at data, because we know based on the past 2 elections that Trump has this ceiling of 48, 49, 50% in these swing states. Yes, he can get there. He can get there. He can win. It is possible. But the probability that he gets to 54, 55 is not a nice, neat bell curve. It's skewed one way. He's very likely to get to 47, 48. He's less likely to get to 50. That's why I have him as an underdog in the blue wall states.
Yeah, to that point, let me just add one point. To that point, I'll throw in North Carolina. So 7 swing states. Yep. In neither election did Trump hit 50%.
In North Carolina?
States. So that's 14 observations. 0 did he even get 50.
He got very, very close, like 49.9 or something in North Carolina in 2020, I believe. Right. But again, that speaks to this divided, high floor, low ceiling that MAGA has. And, maybe he's improving in California. He'll only lose California by 25 instead of 30. But, we're looking at 7 swing states, really. And I have to remind people of this. If Kamala Harris wins the 3 blue wall states, Trump has no path to victory. None. Not one. That almost certainly, Kamala gets to 270. If she loses Wisconsin, which I think is her weakest state in the blue wall, that's 10 electoral votes. But that can be patched by either North Carolina or Georgia, or even possibly, I'm not giving up on Arizona because Gallego is doing so well in Arizona. So we really have, if Kamala Harris doesn't hold the blue wall states, which I think is more likely than not, there is still a path to victory. Whereas
that data point, Kurt and Carl, in 16 and 20, 2 elections, 7 battleground states in each election, that's 14 data points. Donald Trump never hit 50% in any of those 7 states in either election. But then I would flip that, Kurt and Carl. The Democratic nominee in those 14 data points, how many times between Hillary and Biden did they hit 50 or more in those 7 states?
3.
Only 3 times, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so but they never got below they got below 49 once.
But then, Kurt, if you're a nervous Nelly Democrat, that will give you pause, right? Because they would say, well, come on, Kurt, Biden and Hillary barely hit that. They didn't hit that 50% mark.
Yeah, I stand corrected on the one. So Trump got 50 in Georgia in 2016. 51.
Got it. Okay, so he hit it once. And you're saying, Kurt and Carl, the Dems, Hillary and Biden combined, hit that 50 mark 3 out of 14 times?
1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yep.
Carl Allen, that doesn't give me great confidence.
Yeah,
that means it's hard for
again. It's a 2-point advantage. That's the default. So
I'm nervous. I'm nervous.
Joe.
But there's
Here's the deal.
No, but Carl, to Kurt's point, and I understand 2016 because there was a viable third party there that got 3 to 4%, but there wasn't a third party in 20, was there?
Right. Not a real big one. The Libertarian candidate Jorgensen, I think she got up to 1.5 in Pennsylvania. But look, Joe, here's the thing, and here's the difference that I'm seeing. So I'm friends with a lot of Trump Republicans. I'm friends with a lot of Harris supporters. I'm friends with people to my left, to my right, etc. What I'm seeing on social media is this exuberant overconfidence among people on the right and this extreme underconfidence among people on the left. To your point earlier, Joe, I wrote down this quote because I love it. You said Tucker Carlson went on stage and said that he basically guaranteed that Trump would win, or that he said that Harris couldn't win. You said, I would not say that because it is not true. And therein lies the difference between our mentality. You are a intellectually honest person. You would not put 100% probability on something unless you really knew it was a 100% probability. Whereas people on the right now, especially these ardent Trump supporters, they're looking at, say, early voting data, which tells us very little, and drawing these enormous extrapolated conclusions about it. It's not going to happen. Pennsylvania is not going to go 55% for either candidate. It's not going to be a blowout. It is going to be close. But again, 2 to 3 points is, relative to swing states, a comfortable winning margin. But 2 to 3 points is not so confident that I can say, yeah, Harris has this in the bag. 50.5, Joe. That's where my median forecast is for Kamala Harris in Michigan and Pennsylvania, her two strongest blue wall states. 50.5% of the vote is not a blowout, blow away, easy victory. That's not going to be called immediately. So we have to understand, yes, this will be close, but there's no reason for Democrats to be wallowing right now. Democrats are favored to win this.
Well, Kurt and Carl, I think the other non-data reason that Democrats are going bananas right now is because they believe the threat of what he is too.
Yeah, right.
But Kurt, Carl, react to this, and I'll start with you, Kurt. And I don't know what the number is, but there's always been this belief that the Democrat has to win by 3 or 4 nationally, or that Democrat won't win in the Electoral College. She's not up by as much as Biden was up. She's not up by as much nationally as Hillary was up over Trump.
So we have to be careful. Careful about looking at margins.
The polls, then you could argue the polls are more accurate now. I mean, so she's still up. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing about, I would not infer anything because the polls have looked very similar in the pattern. In fact, I think you just posted on this today, Carl, on, the way that was showing kind of the red wave and, oh my God, the Republicans are taking over. I mean, Oz in 8 of the last 10 polls in Pennsylvania showed a pretty substantial gap over Fetterman. Fetterman ended up winning pretty comfortably. I mean, it wasn't a huge gap, but he went 4 or 5 points. But it was a comfortable victory.
But here's my ignorant lead into you, Carl.
Yep.
In 2016, Hillary was up 2 to 3 points nationally, and she lost electorally, barely. It was pretty much a tie. In 2020, Biden was up, 4, 5, 6 nationally, and Biden barely beat Trump electorally. It was almost a tie.
You know what?
Kamala, it's a tie nationally, or she's up by little. That would
Yep.
scare me.
Well,
then.
you're obsessing over gaps. First of all, you know what the difference on the real clear average versus what Biden actually got was like 0.1 point. So that nailed it exactly. And not all the 100% was accounted for. This is Carl's main shtick: is you have to consider what's going to happen with the undecideds, and they're the whole ballgame. And I always worry that the campaign doesn't focus enough on that fact. I mean, I see a lot of effort on, hey, can we get some of these Haley Republicans over? That's fine. You're going to get it on the margin, but there's not big numbers there. Focus on the low propensity independents, which tend to be young women.
Carl, you can address that, but address me first. Yeah. I worry that she doesn't have a big enough national lead to win electorally. Go.
You have to be very careful about extrapolating national trends to individual swing states, because we know all of these things are correlated, but the level of correlation is not perfect. So when we say in my forecast, if Kamala Harris wins nationally by 2, that translates to a narrow victory or a narrow loss in all of these states. Like, that's technically true, but let me show you the difference between a 2-point national victory and a 2.5-point national victory. A 2-point national electoral victory, which I have at 50.5 to 48.5. A 2-point national victory would give her about a 50% chance of winning, but a 2.5-point national victory would give her a 70% chance of winning. We're talking half a freaking point, the difference between 50 and 70%. There is no, and as arrogant as you might think I am about how great my forecasts are, there is not a forecaster in the world who can be that precise to half a percentage point with where the poll averages are versus where they will be. So when we're drawing these correlations, everything is subject to variation.
Right, but Carl,
going from national to state is very, very is not a good practice.
But in what you just said, Carl, are you acknowledging there is a correlation?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course, yeah. So let's say if Kamala Harris wins nationally by 4 points, that indicates that she's swept the blue wall states.
Right.
Oh, sorry, she swept all the swing states.
That's a landslide.
Not just the blue wall states, all the swing states. If she wins nationally by 4, if Donald Trump wins the popular vote, which is to say that Kamala Harris is very close or loses the popular vote, that indicates that Trump has won all of the swing states. So yes, there is a correlation there, but that correlation comes from what happens in all of those swing states. This isn't a one-way calculation where what happens in Washington and California directly impacts what happens in the swing states. It's the other way. What happens in the swing states directly impacts what happens on the national level.
But if she wins nationally by 2 points, that could be a real close electoral game, correct?
Correct. If she only wins nationally by about 2 points, which means she's gotten about 50 to 50.5% of the popular vote, that indicates
about what Hillary did. Which is about what Hillary did.
Right.
Yeah, I don't like Joe. Think back to 2004, Bush versus Kerry. In your mind, was that a big victory, a narrow victory, a close nail biter? How do you think about it?
Electorally, he won a pretty decent victory, right?
He won by 4 points.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So electoral. So that translated to a pretty comfortable electoral victory, right?
The only thing that does give the only reason why I wouldn't jack this up to like 90, 95%, the one data point that gives me pause, because every other data point goes in Harris's favor. The only thing is, and I'm really confused by it, is why Trump's favorability has drifted more. It's still underwater, but I mean, it used to just be horrible.
It's the best it's ever been, Kurt.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, looking at the extremes, there's still a big gap, and I tend to look only at the very faves, very unfaves, and there's still pretty big gap, but it's definitely better than it was, say, 2 years ago or something. So, so that gives, but Harris's favorability is substantially better. And that's a metric that correlates highly to preference.
I think that he's done a great job of normalizing himself, and we've all normalized
Eating cats and dogs? How? Where? Like, come on.
Forget it. That ship sailed. We have normalized him as unfortunately, I think, as a normal candidate. Hey, Kurt, can I push back and Carl jump on my side or jump on Kurt's side? I have been working my freaking ass off with Republicans for Harris, and I do believe like there's something unprecedented going on. Like there is a huge silent Republican vote for her out there that could impact on the margins. But you think, Kurt, it's just going to be like it always is? He'll get the same number of Republican percentage?
You can see that in the data. I mean, at all the crosstabs I see, it's like, what are they getting, 2 or 3% crossover? It's not much. I mean, the data I was looking at in 22 was suggested there was going to be a big crossover, and then the exit polling said, nah, didn't happen. So I'm always skeptical that there's a whole lot of fertile ground that can be. I mean, because if you do get more than 5% of the Republicans going over to Harris, I mean, that's game over right there. That won't be on the margin. Then that is indicative of a big victory.
Carl, are you as skeptical of this unprecedented Republicans for Harris movement as my friend Kurt is?
I wouldn't say I'm extremely skeptical of it, because if you had to put a probability on which will happen, Biden voters will switch over to Trump, or Trump voters will switch over to Harris. The data shows, and again, speaking to all of these endorsements that Harris is getting from mayors and governors and people that are from traditionally red areas, that tells me that the poll data that indicates that there's this crossover vote is real, because these people would not be speaking out so confidently and so openly about voting for Harris if it was not considered at least somewhat acceptable in their circles. So we know that there's a faction of voters who will always vote no matter what. Some of them could either vote for Trump or for Harris. So all of this work that's been done among the Harris campaign, they don't think of this as, oh, they're only 1%, 2% persuadable. We don't really need to worry about them, because remember, changing a vote from Republican to Democrat, which is to say they might have voted for Trump, they might have voted for Harris, that's a net gain of 2. That's not turning out someone who might not vote for you or might not vote, but if they vote for you. That's a net gain of 1. If you can get someone who would have voted for Trump, which is +1 for Trump, to switch to you, and that's a +1 for you, that's a net swing of 2. So when you convince the work that you're doing, Joe, when you get these highly likely voters to cross over, you're basically doing double. You're getting double bang for your buck, so to speak. So Democrats aren't taking we're going to focus on this or we're going to focus on this. They're focusing on low propensity voters.
Give me a number. Give me a number. Kurt, start with you. What percentage of the Republican vote will she end up getting?
4.
Carl.
I'll take the over. I would set the over under at 7%.
Wow.
That's not to say there's not value to the Republican kind of what you're doing, Republicans against Trump. I think that message resonates pretty strongly with independent voters, that there's, this bipartisan type of appeal.
Yeah.
I just, I wouldn't focus that message only on Republicans.
A couple more for you each. I'll start with you, Kurt Jetta. What is your biggest concern for her?
Turnout.
If you were her,
and actually, I'm not as concerned about turnout as I would have been at the beginning of the cycle, because again, the data I'm seeing shows that there's equal, if not a little bit better, enthusiasm on Harris's side. I mean, they just need to execute, and I think they probably have that covered. And then also anecdotally, I don't see the Trump enthusiasm. I've told you many times on the whole Trump voter thing. I live right on the Intercoastal. I see in 2020 how many of those freaking votes had Trump signs back then, how many houses were posted. I mean, it's about a tenth of as much. And I think there is it corroborates the data that I see in the polls that there's not as much enthusiasm.
Okay. But answer this, and then I'm going to ask Carl that question too. If you were her campaign manager, what would be your single biggest concern?
Is this, you're asking me?
You.
Yeah. I mean, and it's the single biggest concern of every Democratic candidate is that the people that are highest propensity Democratic voters are the lowest propensity voters. That's ethnics, that is young voters. I mean, those are the ones, particularly the youngs. I mean, they can be very flaky as a group. Their turnout percentages are always way, way below anybody over 55. I mean, a big part of that Biden surge was because that gap narrowed. There was a lot of more younger voters.
Yeah.
I think the overall turnout this year is going to be significantly less. It'll be more than 2016, but not near what 2020 was.
Carl, you're her campaign manager 1 week out. What is your biggest concern?
It's not really a concern so much as a data point, and that's just how I look at things, I guess. So we talk about early vote. We cannot compare 2024 vote to 2020. You can't do it. Anyone who is trying to compare 2020 to 2024 apples to apples is immediately irrelevant in my mind as a data analyst. You cannot compare them because they are not even close to the same election. Right now, I'm looking at the big city turnout where Kamala Harris needs to run up the totals. Everybody's so focused on the margins. She has to win Philadelphia by 60, for example. She has to win it, 80-20. And she has to bank votes there.
Yes.
To win Pennsylvania, in my calculation, she needs about 3.2 to 3.4 million votes in Pennsylvania. That means she needs to get X number of votes in Philadelphia. Right now, we're seeing lower turnout in the big cities, but this is just early vote. We can't extrapolate early vote to election day turnout.
Right.
So 1 week from today, when we're banking or when we're looking at the early vote that came in over the weekend, which will be the biggest turnout of any early vote, will be this coming weekend. That's what I'm going to be looking at to say Democrats are looking really good. This is going to be really close, or Democrats are not looking good. We will know after next weekend, before election day itself, how things are looking for Democrats, and it all comes down to, are they running up their totals?
Yeah.
So that's I guess that you could say that was my biggest concern.
Running
it up in the big cities.
I would add Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the linchpin. It has, of the blue wall states, significantly more white population, which is, again, Trump's base. And so, I get concerned when they spend so much time in Pennsylvania. Of course, it's important, but Pennsylvania is going to do better than Wisconsin for Harris. I don't know those percentages, but it's going to be Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, as far as percentage of vote for Harris. And Wisconsin, in my mind, is the linchpin state. You get that, that's the game.
And Carl, you said earlier that of the blue wall states, that's the one that concerns you the most. Hey, Kurt, I have one more question for each of you, but Kurt, any questions you've got for Carl at all?
How much, I don't hear a lot about kind of how other countries have voted. I mean, there's clearly kind of the pro-liberalism forces, have gained, and we do see the paths and the flows of the way the electorate goes in the U.S. We're not in a bubble. You see it in all the Western countries. How much do you put on that, Carl? How do you think about how the UK did in their election, how France annihilated Marine Le Pen, that type of thing?
The rise of authoritarianism around the world is something that is very high on my list of things that I think about. because there is a kind of a coordinated effort among these authoritarians to consolidate power for themselves. And we see Trump cozying up to people like Putin and other dictators. But it's not just these guys. I think about some of these authoritarians in South America, in Argentina, in Hungary. There are these authoritarians who are consolidating power. Well, Venezuela is the perfect example. Even though Venezuela is traditionally a left-wing country, Maduro's an authoritarian at the end of the day. So that does concern me to a great extent. But a lot of these authoritarians are being rejected at the ballot box. So as someone who's interested in, like Joe, preserving democracy, saying whoever gets the most votes in these states wins that state. No, we can't just say we're going to give it to the House or we're going to allocate the votes however we want. We are going to count the votes, and that's what determines who wins. People who think like that are siding with Democrats, because Republicans are literally trying to change the rules of how electoral votes are allocated, how the vote counting is done, when the vote counting is done, just to make it look like they won. That's exactly what Maduro did in Venezuela. And it's absolutely disgusting.
Last question I've got for you two. Give me the Senate. Carl, start with you. I think Republicans are a lock to win the Senate. Disagree with me or not?
I wouldn't say that because it's not true, Joe. To quote someone, it is not true, because if Democrats have a decent election, decent meaning they haven't blown anything out. If they have a decent election, they hold Ohio, which gives them 49 Senate seats. If they have a very good, medium to very good election, that means the independent in Nebraska, who it's questionable whether or not he will caucus with Democrats. I think that's the best bet.
He will.
If they win Nebraska, Osborne, the independent, that there's a very good chance that they get to 50 seats, and that's not blowing anything out. I don't think Democrats.
He's stretching. Kurt, our friend.
I don't know. I have seen that because everybody's focused on Tester in Montana. Tester's very vulnerable. But yeah, that Nebraska is sneaking up. I agree.
Oh, so you're buying. You're buying a little bit. It would have to be
a national shift that was kind of seeing it. There's not something kind of. It's not going to be an aberration to the overall national performance, I would say.
Let me tell you something interesting about Nebraska, Joe. They have 2 Senate seats on the ballot. Obviously, the presidential election, Trump's going to win by 20. The special election where I think it was the resignation, Sauce, I think is his name. He resigned. The person who's replacing him, the Republican's going to win by a lot. But also on the ballot is a race with an independent and a Republican. It's not a Democrat and a Republican. It's an independent and a Republican.
Yeah.
Osborne has done quite well for himself. Fisher has made several unforced errors, including trying to get rid of Nebraska's 2nd district electoral vote that will cost her some points there. It's not going to be an easy victory. I do have Fisher as the favorite there, but I have it at 1-3 that Osborne beats Fisher in that race. And if he wins, that would likely give Democrats their 50th seat in the Senate. So we are looking at not a huge improbability. 538, by the way, has Osborne at 6% to win Nebraska. That's not right. And there's nothing else I can say except that's not right. I could buy 20%. I could buy 40%. It's not 6.
Yeah, I agree with that. Kurt Jetta, follow him on Twitter at Kurt Jetta, all one word, at Kurt Jetta. Carl Allen, follow him on Twitter at Real Carl Allen.
Hey, Joe, can I ask one more question before we sign up? Comment on your boy Aaron. What's going on there?
Aaron Rodgers?
Yes.
Kurt, I am so fucking disappointed. I thought this was going to be the year. Can I ask you a question? Why are they not good? Why is the Jets defense so bad? And is Aaron just average now? He's not just average.
People
can't explain
he was a very mobile quarterback. I mean, for a very long time, nobody really gave him any credit for that. I know that now he can't move hardly at all. But
That's my biggest sporting disappointment in the world. I had them booked for the Super Bowl this year. Carl, don't you laugh at me. I love Aaron Rodgers to death.
But we can rejoice in the bloodbath the Eagles inflicted on the Bengals. So there.
Well, the Bengals suck. By the way, your Eagles are still extremely flawed. Extremely flawed.
Not yesterday, but
big jerk. See how he did that, Carl? He had to get in the Aaron Rodgers shot at the end of this 1 week from election, and he gets in a shot at my favorite professional athlete. Actually, my second favorite professional athlete, because Caitlin Clark is my favorite.
Ooh, that's a hot take. Give me Lamar Jackson. Give me Lamar Jackson.
Oh, overrated in money time.
Don't get him started. See, now you just tacked on another hour to this podcast, for God's sake.
Bring it. Let's go.
Carl, Lamar Jackson will never meet the moment in money time.
He's done it before. If memory serves, I believe he has the record for the highest completion percentage in a comeback. 85 or 86% passing. His team was down 20 to 28 or something like that, and they came back to win on his passing. The thing that people said he couldn't do.
He's like that Eagles quarterback, just not a passer.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're done. Be brave, everybody.
Thank you.
Remember to listen, share, and follow The Social Contract with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been The Social Contract with Joe Walsh.